All right, guys, so we have some absolutely gigantic waves that are currently being made in the AI/tech world after China dropped their DeepSeek AI model that, according to the reports, and we'll get to more of the details of this here in a second, but essentially when compared to the US tech oligarch created models, it has better performance. They did it for significantly cheaper and with less computing power, and it's also open source, so it's much more democratized, which is the complete antithesis to what the US tech oligarchs wanted the future of AI to look like. Now, as this news has been spreading around, this is the result. This is just over the last day or so. Biggest market loss in history, Nvidia has shedded nearly $600 billion as DeepSeek shakes AI darling. So, guys, first off, how do we have companies that are this high of a valuation? It went from like $3.5 trillion market cap, I guess, to like a $2.9 trillion market cap. That's larger than a vast majority of country GDPs around the world. It's comparable, I think, to like the GDP of France, which is completely insane. Ken Klippenstein, by the way, recently just dropped a report about how the U.S. national security state is apparently becoming worried that some corporations are becoming more powerful than nation states. So I don't know, maybe something to keep an eye on in terms of monopolization and the, raging state of capitalism that we are currently in right now. But $600 billion just evaporated out of thin air from this one company. Now, they'll probably survive, I guess, but again, this is just an indication in terms of how big of a tsunami this DeepSeek China AI model actually was. Now, in terms of the impact economically of Nvidia's stock crash and, the impact on the tech world right now and the tech stocks and this industry in general and how we have designed it here in the United States in combination with a real, lack of a legitimate safety net and how much of American society is tied up in the well-being of Wall Street. There was this take here from Joe Weisenthal that I thought was insightful, again, in terms of just like the fundamental flaws of how we are designing our society moving forward. So he said, regardless, I think a big macro fact about the American economy is that we have a de facto social contract where financial assets are expected to go up over time. So just this endless growth model, right? He says, assets going up is how we pay for college, retirements, and so forth. There's been a lot of anxiety about competition with China in manufactured goods over the last several years, but manufacturing isn't what really drives the U.S. stock market higher. When we're talking about big tech and software, well, now we're getting right to the heart of how people fund their lives. So it's kind of a big deal if our tech companies are getting dicked around by China, especially as China is really pushing for a shot across the bow here with an open-sourced model, right? Keep in mind, the tech oligarchs here in the U.S., they want full control over the AI infrastructure, over the software, over every component of it, right? They want a closed-off, privatized, for-profit version of the future of AI, which is, in all likelihood, going to be one of, if not the most transformative, innovations in modern human history, right? So their view of the future of this is that we want to have sort of like a small bastion of kings that get to lord over the rest of us. They get to decide what to do with this incredibly powerful and influential technology. And keep in mind as well that kind of the whole purpose, at least from their view, and we'll get to more of their previous statements here that are incredibly dystopian, but like kind of the whole point of the development of this AI is eventually to replace human labor. So AI, it's a tool at the end of the day. It could be used for good, it could be used for bad, but under a capitalist economic model, it's just not going to be used to benefit average working class Americans. And they're openly admitting this. So if you combine the fact that they want to use this kind of technology to replace American workers, and you combine that with the fact that we don't really have a real social safety net, we don't have, universal access to healthcare or to education or to any of these other, basic things that we need, to housing and others, like this is not a recipe for a stable functioning society moving forward, right? So I thought that was a good point that was made there. Now, we also have some reaction here from CNBC in terms of the stocks plummeting. Again, it wasn't just Nvidia. That just happened to be a record-setting plunge, but it's a bunch of other tech, platforms as well. So let's go ahead and check in with CNBC, the financial, I guess, quote unquote gurus here, and how they're a little bit scared in their own words about what, China just did and how that may be a indication moving forward.
The AI related stocks. So Nvidia, ARM, AMD, Microsoft, Meta, interestingly, on that list, given its open source. We got to talk about the open source, closed source bit of this as well.
And then that's a shocker to see Nvidia down by more than 12% right now.
Absolutely. And then you have global chip stocks also in the red across the board, ASML Holdings and others. There is the question, I will say, Alexander Wang made the point last week, and it's become sort of the question mark about all of this, which is, he suggested on our air that it is possible that they were using some of the highest performing Nvidia chips, perhaps as many as 50,000 of them, to build this model. Now, and they weren't supposed to have those chips.
Right.
If that's true.
So he's talking basically about a little bit of what seems to be the cope here from some of our tech leaders, which is, the U.S. has been trying to put pressure on China. They've been trying to prevent them from getting access to some of the most advanced chip technology, right, that's used to power these kinds of AI models and whatnot. And basically the cope seems to be that, no, it's not that China managed to do more with less. It's that they were actually cheating and they found a workaround to getting their hands on the most advanced chips, and that's how they actually did it. And they're lying to the world about how efficient this new AI DeepSeek model actually is. So that's sort of the cope that's going on right now. Believe it if you want to. I don't know the actual, details. There's no way for me to fact check whether or not that's true, but that's sort of the cope from the tech leaders right now.
Not the size.
The dynamic is different. Yeah. If it's not true, then maybe all bets are off. It's possible, by the way, even if it is true, meaning even if they use those chips to create this, or at least partially to create this, it is still a significantly more efficient and better model. I think everybody agrees that right this moment, I mean, I don't know if did you get to play? It is mind-blowing.
It looks really great. I mean, it feels like it's open source, so people can test this out themselves.
But I can tell you all the tests that I do just to see whether I think the writing is better, whether I think that it can answer certain questions. Yeah. I mean, it was not only faster, it was more human. The reasoning is shocking. I mean, there were moments where I was like, oh my God. We are so much. You could feel the step change as a person. I will also say, as exciting as it was, there was an element where I became scared because I thought, I had the opportunity to talk to all these people last week, and they all said the future's here and da 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 da. And then you sort of see it, and you go, oh, okay, I feel you.
So they're saying they're a little bit scared. They're saying there's definitely legitimacy to the claim that DeepSeek is just more efficient, even if China, they potentially did a workaround against the export controls and got their hands on this kind of tech. But, this is a breakdown here that I thought was good in terms of understanding the difference between the DeepSeek model versus OpenAI and ChatGPT and everything else. So this is Matt Binder here in Mashable. And let's just go ahead and read some of this article. He says, DeepSeek is open in a way that OpenAI said that ChatGPT would be and never delivered on. Keep in mind, that was sort of the opening pitch of OpenAI as a company, is we don't want to be like necessarily profit driven. We want to sort of be like a nonprofit or an NGO or whatever. And we want to be more open and democratized and whatever else the case may be. They went back on that. Sam Altman, they completely transformed the company into being a profit-driven enterprise, and they started trying to close things off. So they sort of betrayed that, and DeepSeek stepped in, and they were like, okay, we'll do that if you guys won't. So they say, in fact, OpenAI sheds its original open ethos. DeepSeek went ahead and released its model as open source. So anyone can download the DeepSeek R1 model for free and run it locally on their own device, which is also important because one of the biggest critiques that I've seen from people is they're like, if you're trying to ask it about Tiananmen Square or whatever, then there's some issues with Chinese censorship. But that's kind of irrelevant if it's open source, right? Because as they're saying here, you can run it locally, meaning that the issues of whatever censorship you want to allege is going on here, that's irrelevant. It's open source, right? So it's available for anybody to get their hands on, to look under the hood, to change it and expand on it in whatever way that they want to. So, that's an important point there. They say this means your data won't be shared in any way with DeepSeek. And in addition, even as DeepSeek users pointed out, they can get get around any censorship or skewed results. So he continues. He says DeepSeek is more affordable than OpenAI. So while OpenAI's training for each model appears to be in multiples of tens of millions of dollars, DeepSeek claims that it pulled off training its models for $5.5 million. So a tiny fraction of the cost there. And they say that the price difference also appears to be passed on to the consumers. So in terms of the breakdown on they call it like, tokens is how they refer to it here. I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know the exact, technological meaning behind this, but essentially like the per capita cost for however many words you're trying to, trying to get out of the model. So this is 750,000 words is, I guess, 1 million tokens is sort of the exchange rate that's going on here. But anyways, DeepSeek's model apparently is 14 cents per 1 million tokens. And OpenAI's model, their Model 1, was $7.50 per 1 million tokens. So again, a tiny fraction of the cost. Now, he also says that in terms of the outputs, in terms of the capabilities, technologically, it also seems to be a little bit better. There are some things that OpenAI is a little bit better at, but they say that ChatGPT and DeepSeek users agree that OpenAI's chatbot still exceeds in conversational matters or creative output, as well as information on news and current events. However, the consensus is that DeepSeek is superior for more technical tasks. So if you ask AI chatbots for logical reasoning or coding or mathematical equations, DeepSeek is the preferable option to that. So, it seems like we're kind of just getting clocked by this Chinese startup company. Spent significantly less than us, did more, had a better performance, had a better outcome than us, and they also made it open source as sort of a fuck you to the guys who've been flanking Trump during the opening days of his administration. So this was a recent announcement by Trump. It was one of the first things that he did when he got into office is he surrounded himself by a bunch of tech oligarchs, guys like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai and the TikTok guy, I'm blanking on what his name is, but Tim Apple, as well as Trump calls him, and Sam Altman of OpenAI. So these are sort of the so-called, I guess, oligarchs that have been surrounding Trump. Nice way to flush out the deep state, by the way, and to take on the establishment by surrounding yourself with the most powerful and the wealthiest people in human history. Great job on that. I guess you confronted the establishment, but so they announced a $500 billion investment. That's sort of like a partnership between a couple companies. I think it's like Oracle and OpenAI and a few others as well. And I guess the U.S. government is sort of partnering in that in some way. Kind of unclear exactly how that's going to play out. But $500 billion to basically try to, again, build out the infrastructure, the power, the data centers, the server centers, whatever it is, so that not only the U.S., but specifically these tech oligarchs can have sort of a centralized, monopolistic stranglehold on this technology moving forward. That's the purpose of this kind of a major investment, right? Now, we also adhere, in terms of that same idea of the issues of monopolization in this kind of an industry, an article here from Dropsite News, Ryan Grimm, saying that DeepSeek just proved that Lina Khan was right. Because essentially Lina Khan, obviously Biden's FTC that was pushed out by the incoming Trump administration, Biden's FTC was one of the only bright spots of his administration, his FTC, his NLRB, which, by the way, Trump is absolutely obliterating right now. I'll have a story on that later today. But the FTC was one of his only bright spots because Lina Khan was actually serious about confronting monopolies and abuses of power in the U.S. economy. And she was right about this because she essentially warned these tech companies that if you continue to monopolize this power, if you continue to squash domestic competition in this process where they're basically buying up whatever startup comes across their way and either destroying it or shaking it down for parts or just bringing on and hiring some of their software engineers or just incorporating it into their status quo business model, if you do that domestically, eventually that's going to result in stagnation. Right. So in other words, not only is this monopolization bad for us as average Americans, but it's also bad for these companies in the long run. And DeepSeek just proved that. And Ryan also points out that over the last number of decades, there's essentially been this contract between the U.S. government and Silicon Valley, right? Where they essentially agreed, the U.S. government said, we will let you guys, you tech oligarchs, become the wealthiest people in human history, and in exchange, develop us technology that will make the US, have hegemonic control moving forward in terms of power projection across the world for the next century. And so what happened was the first part of that deal was met, and these people became obscenely wealthy, guys worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But now we're getting cleaned out by the Chinese models. So they didn't really follow through on sort of that corrupt promise that was made, or that deal that was made between the US and Silicon Valley giants. And again, it's not really hard to see why that ended up happening. Again, Lena Khan was right. Now, how is the Trump administration going to handle this moving forward? I think we've got our answer, right? He's essentially letting the tech oligarchs run the show. Now, in terms of some of the ominous and dystopian things that these guys have been talking about over the last couple of months and years. So here we had Sam Altman, who said, advancing AI may require, quote, changes to the social contract. He says the entire structure of society will be up for debate and reconfiguration. Now, I actually think there should be a debate going on right now amongst the American people and amongst the entire world about what exactly do we want to do with this technology? How can we use this for the betterment of humanity instead of for the betterment of an elite few who get to sit at the top and control everything? There should be a debate like that going on. It doesn't really seem like there is, other than, on the fringes, but in terms of in the power centers in this country, that debate's not really going on. They basically, bent over for these oligarchs here. But the core point here is, who the fuck are you, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison? Who are you guys to decide what this change to the social contract is going to be? But this is how they view themselves. Again, they view themselves as essentially God kings. They are the smart ones. We are sort of inferior to them. And so they should be able to make these decisions, and they know what's best, right? Now, Kate Willett here points out that she did a little bit of research on what Altman actually means by a change in a social contract. And she says, in 2021, he wrote an essay arguing that AI will create mass unemployment. Again, that's sort of the goal of all of this. Keep in mind, our own fucking government is investing hundreds of billions of dollars with almost like no regulation, it seems, to put us out of work. That's like the deal that's being made here. But he says, since it's going to create mass unemployment, everyone will need to have basic income of around $14,000 a year, plus shares of stock in tech companies. Does it get more dystopian than this? I don't know about you guys, but if you lived on like a farm, like in some rural place, maybe you could like slightly get by on this amount of money. There is no population center in the United States of America where you can survive on $14,000 a year. That won't even cover rent in most American cities, right? So not exactly sure what his dystopian future is that he's envisioning there, but I think he's making it pretty clear for us. Now, apparently he's also somewhat of a prepper, which is pretty dark, maybe a major red flag there, that the guy who is leading the charge on the future of AI is essentially worried that it might lead to the end of the world, and he's stocking up on guns, gold, potassium iodide, antibiotics, batteries, water, and of course gas masks from the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. And by the way, just as a reminder, there is an intimate connection here between these tech oligarchs and the IDF. In fact, Larry Ellison went out of his way to donate $16.6 million to the IDF. And then we also had this report here from Dropsite News that I thought was interesting on the Israeli military being one of Microsoft's top AI customers, according to leaked documents that they got their hands on. Now, following up there on Larry Ellison himself, with another bleak and alarming statement here about how AI is going to be intertwined with mass surveillance, and this will result in citizens being on their best behavior. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video. So if that altercation that occurred in Memphis, the chief of police would be immediately notified.
Look at how casually they talk about this. Let's do mass surveillance using AI so that people will feel such immense societal pressure that they will be, quote, on their best behavior. This is the world that these guys are envisioning for us. Now, I also, as we finish off this video here, want to point out that there are massive, massive implications as we expand the AI tech sector environmentally, right? We're already destroying our planet in, a million different ways, but AI is making that significantly worse. These AI centers require an immense amount of power, most of which is being fueled by fossil fuels. They use up a ton of water as we are depleting our fresh water sources right now around the world. And it requires a ton of electronic equipment that then produces hazardous waste. Like, as I point out here from the United Nations, mercury and lead. So it's pretty bleak, man. I wish that I could look at a technology like AI, which is amazing in a number of different ways. Like, I use it pretty frequently. I use sometimes the AI image generation for certain like graphical things that I'm trying to do. I've experimented with ChatGPT and a few other models as well, like DeepSeek and a couple others. But it's interesting and it's powerful and it has potential to do some good, but that's just not the trajectory that we're going on right now. The trajectory that we're going on right now, if the US tech oligarchs win out and they prevent this from being a more democratized and open source sort of technology that's used for the betterment of average people, then we're essentially just going to end up with like a literal handful of obscenely wealthy God King tech overlords who get to make all of these decisions about the societal contract. And as they're pushing us towards mass unemployment and towards mass surveillance, maybe they'll sprinkle a few crumbs on the side. I mean, it's just so incredibly dystopian.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying